Good afternoon, everybody who has joined our webinar today. This is Gretchen Schultz. I am Director of Content Development, specifically for Formative Assessment Development for McGraw-Hill Education School Group. And I welcome you and I thank you for joining us this afternoon to take a close look at performance assessment and what's it worth to you. As the title suggests, we are going to focus on the value and worth of performance assessment. Performance assessment itself is not new. It's been around for decades, ages, and we know it's not without challenges. But I'm here to show you that it is full of value for educators who work so hard to prepare their students for life outside of the classroom. I'd like to begin with a few slides that just kind of ground us conceptually in assessment. So we're going to start with this happy young guy in the classroom ready to learn. So what's happening to him in his classroom? Well, his teacher has been provided with standards and learning objectives that she is to use to direct her instruction. Those standards are typically determined by stakeholders, and they represent the skills, processes, and knowledge that the stakeholders value, with the goal to making all standards college and career ready. Those standards drive instruction, application, the activities, and the practice that occurs in the classroom so that our young happy little guy here is going to become aware and knowledgeable. He's going to comprehend the information presented to him. He's going to understand. And all of this comprise learning. But how do we know that he has learned? Well, that's where various tools come in that will provide that evidence of learning that's so essential to good instruction. Assessment is one tool for eliciting that evidence of learning. In fact, the goal of assessment is to elicit this evidence to support inferences or claims about what students know and can do. Put more simply, learning is driven by standards. It requires those standards that guide instruction. To see, when I think back to the standards given to me, they were often outlined in the curricula. Back in the day, I'm talking many years ago, I was handed a couple textbooks and a dusty binder, and that's what I was given to determine what instruction. The curriculum has come a long way since then. We have so many more options and so much more information out there that's presented to teachers in so many ways, especially digitally. And all of that is used to help a teacher know in guiding the instruction. Then how do the degree to which we see the success of the instruction and the degree of learning is through assessment. And so learning is standards, instruction, and assessment. And although this is represented here in a straight arrow, it's really very much an iterative process because we use this assessment then to determine what further instruction is needed. In terms of assessment itself, I will say repeatedly that I've had a lot of years as an assessment developer, both at the State Department and with testing companies. And I can kind of boil down what assessment is to this simple slide. In assessment, we gather information. From that information, we draw conclusions. And those conclusions tell us what action needs to be taken. For example, here's a typical constructed response item. Describe the effects the contest has on Sam, assuming the story has just, a student has just read a story about Sam and now is going to respond to this constructed response item, which is a very traditional item type, very ubiquitous in classrooms and assessments. The item itself is written to measure the standards you see at the top of the slide, to describe in depth the character, etc. And what you see at the bottom of the slide, it might be maybe a typical, or certainly an exemplary response. Give you a second to look it over, and you will see that the student has very nicely described the character and provided details from the story to support the conclusions that the student has made. So we have this task, and so what action? If this is the assessment, what action will we take as we gather information from the response? In this particular case, you might think, well, this student has pretty much mastered the ability to describe the character in depth and a character in a story. So action I might take maybe to give the student some more complex text, since he or she seems to do very well with this text. Or I might give the student a drama to read to see if the student could also master describing a character from a drama. If you had a weaker response, the action you might take would be to, let's say the student didn't support his ideas with details, then I would know that student needed some additional instruction around providing details. So those slides are just kind of the foundation, but whoops, too far. Let's go back. Okay. What I'd like to do in the next 35 or so minutes is speak to these bullet points here regarding performance assessment. We're going to look at what are the components of a performance assessment, what are the typical characteristics of tasks and assessment, what is the value, what's it worth. I'll share a couple of samples, a couple of other perspectives and tools, and then we'll have some time at the end for questions and thoughts. So looking first at the components of performance assessment, as with any assessment, there is a goal, a purpose. There's something you'll want to find out, and so you use assessment for that purpose. You want to gather information about what someone knows and can do. So we're going to go really non-academic here, and let's just say our goal is to find out this: what facial expressions are used to convey a variety of emotions. Performance assessment also includes a task related to that goal. If our goal is to look at facial expressions and emotions, this task would be directions that would tell someone what to do or demonstrate relative to that target. For example, this task. In a period of 10 seconds, use facial expressions to show as many different emotions as you can. And along with another component of the performance assessment is an expectation. You have an idea of what you would expect as someone responds to that task. And given that task, you might see something like this little guy in his 10 seconds. Okay, sorry. That is my shameless excuse of sharing my grandson. So there's a task. He performed it. That's my expectation. And then with any assessment, there is evaluation. The performance evaluation would include, what would be that criteria by which you would evaluate your performance? What are the levels of performance? In this case, an advanced performer would demonstrate 5 or more distinct facial expressions, whereas a basic might just show no more than 2 and often repeating the same expression. Then you may have some additional exemplars that would further help you define, represent the criteria. And you see here some exemplars from other members of my family. They would probably die if they knew I just put their silly faces on this. Okie doke. So performance assessment components are a task, expectation, evaluation, and criteria, or evaluation criteria. Here we go. For example, we use those same components in almost anything we do on a daily basis. For example, not too long ago, I subscribed to one of those home food services that sends a box of food once a week and directions on how to make something. So in unboxing the ingredients and following the directions here, my goal was to prepare a meal, try something new. I think in this case it was a tofu Thai something or other. And my task was to very carefully follow the steps to produce that delicious dinner you see in the last illustration. My expectation was to have a nice, tasty dinner, and I evaluated this task by eating it and asking myself, would I make it again? Was there ease in preparation? Was it worth the value? In this particular case, I think it was pretty yummy, and I learned a little bit more about how better to prepare tofu than I had prepared it in the past. So performance is something that we daily do. We daily, purposely, and automatically perform many things in the course of a day that include goals and tasks, expectations, and evaluations. So I turn to you now and ask you to think about those kinds of performances that are part of your daily life. And if you would, just use the chat box down in the lower left-hand corner, I think, of your screen. Your screen might be looking a little different than mine. But if you could, just answer those two questions. What performances are part of your daily life? And what is something you do that requires steps in the process to create a product or complete a task? Give you a few minutes to respond. All right. John, thank you for responding. Yeah, you said laundry, cleaning up after dinner. Yeah. Oh, extra labor, maybe not the most pleasant tasks, but necessary for performing. Although it is very satisfactory when actually the kitchen, everything's all cleaned up and everything is put away. Anybody else out there have any thoughts? Antonio cooks dinner, he goes to the gym, he does some research. Create an outline. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, that's the answer number 2, yeah. Things that require steps in the process, doing research, absolutely. Creating an outline for something. Oh, okay, sorry, Antonio. All right. Thank you for responding. Let's continue and take a closer look now at performance assessment characteristics in the classroom. We've been talking about performance assessment that is part of our daily lives. Let's step now into the classroom and look at what the characteristics of performance assessment are there. First, as illustrated, and as in real life, any performance assessment will have a task context, a performer of that task, and some kind of evaluation. Further, performance assessment typically mirrors authentic real-world scenarios to the extent possible. Granted, we are in a classroom situation, but a quality performance assessment will in some way attempt or work toward mirroring real-world scenarios. And to do so, that task, the assessment, would call for application of skills that one will or is expected to use in life. And finally, a performance assessment will often include a building process with multiple steps. It will guide the performer through an engaging process of integrated steps to complete that task like that home chef meal. It may include those steps may include learning some new information, like research, and then integrating that information, both the information that's new and that which you already have, and applying that knowledge and skills into the completion of the task. I'd like to just ask another question of our participants today, and that is, well, how have you used performance assessment in your classrooms, and what did you like or not like about this form of assessment? As I noted earlier, there are some challenges for performance assessment, and I'm curious to hear if anyone on our webinar today have had any challenges. Okay, I'm not seeing any responses. There we go. Yeah. John, that's the one that what you just expressed is one that I expected. That yes, the challenge would be it takes more time to create and to evaluate. Yes. But Melody has pointed out that in PE classes, those performance tasks, understandably, in the evaluation are daily. That is what you do. And kids love it. I know my grandkids love PE. Okay. So, despite those challenges, or maybe because of that, we are going to focus now on the value of performance assessment in the classroom. What the value that they bring to learning, to assessment, overpowers the challenges that they may bring. So first of all, in a performance assessment, the data are more than the numbers. Here's a sample spreadsheet that I look at on a daily basis that provides those numerical data of raw scores, p-value, difficulty levels, percentile rankings. We interpret them. We use that kind of data to evaluate our tests and how students performed. But the thing about a performance assessment, as illustrated earlier with that constructive response item, is that it is more an authentic performance. It is more specific to the child. And it really tells us it's not this aggregated data, but it is child-centered, and it provides so much more information about that particular child's performance. I think back to some range-finding activities that I participated in over the years, where we looked at many, many hundreds of student responses to test items. And those responses, those direct responses from students, told us so much more about what was happening in the classroom, what students were learning, and also how well our tests were performing. Were the items clear to the students? How a student responds tells us very clearly whether we were effective in communicating the task to the student. So that I would say is the first value, that the performance assessment data is much more than numbers. Secondly, the performance assessment is one multiple part, an integrated task, can elicit so much more evidence of learning across multiple related skills and across content areas. So this graphic here represents a performance task which measures multiple skills. These are integrated, and they provide a lot of information about the student in one meta item rather than in separate, singular, discrete items. Next, the value of performance assessment is that it requires critical thinking and perseverance on the part of the performer. It really hits those higher order skills of any cognitive taxonomy, like this one Bloom's verb and task wheel. A performance assessment will hit on evaluation and certainly synthesis. It will include some kind of analysis and application of those skills. Almost every aspect in the center of that wheel becomes part of an effective quality performance assessment. A performance assessment will also provide information, as I've said a few times, that will guide instructional decisions. This is key to teachers. Remember, assessment is about gathering information, drawing conclusions, and taking action based on those conclusions. And a performance assessment can provide an awful lot of information that will inform next steps. And as I've said repeatedly too, performance assessment will correlate to the real world. These are not, again, not random, discrete, multiple choice items, but they are integrated tasks very closely connected to the real world that measure skills that translate out of the classroom to college and careers. I'd like to pause to see if there's any questions or comments up to this point regarding experiences with performance assessment or anything that I've said thus far. If you have any, you can just type them in the chat box. I don't see any questions popping up today, so I'll take that as a good sign, and I'm going to move on now to the next part of the presentation here. And I'd like to share with you some sample performance tasks. These are tasks that come from our performance task pool from McGraw-Hill. These are available to our McGraw-Hill Education customers. And I have a math sample for you and an ELA sample. And, hang on, okay, yes, first this slide. As I share these two tasks, I'd like you to do a task of your own. Think about this question. What real-world skills do students apply when they're responding to the following performance tasks? So I'll put them on the screen. This first math task has about 6 or 7 steps that make it up. And I'll give you just a few minutes to skim through each part, and just on something that you have available, just jot down what skill is being measured or is being addressed in each part of this task, this assessment. And again, as you can see, this is in math grade 4. And Melody, you get to teach bowling, golf, and swimming. I want to come to your class. My grandchildren live in Vermont, and their PE activities include snowshoeing. They freeze the tennis courts, and they go ice skating in the winter. Yes, their PE activities are very much involved in outdoor winter living. All right, so there's your first item. Second item, let's move on to that. Take a look at that one. Part B, skim through that and note what it is that the student has to do, what skill is being applied here. Okie doke. Next, and as you skim through these, I hope you're picking up that these are all of these parts are integral to the task, the full task. It's a building process. They're integrated. Some of the skills are repeated. So take a look at item 5 or parts 5 and 6 here and jot down what it is that the students must be doing. What skills do the students apply? Okay. One more part. This part and the next part. What are students doing here? Part E. Melody, thank you for being a good responder. Lots of good answers. Thanks. And then the last part of our math performance assessment in Part F, we wrap it all up. The question about Eileen and Dad, that's choice. Okay, let's take a few minutes now to answer this question together. Again, this is the question I posed early on. What real-world skills do the students apply when they're responding to that math performance test? I've started it for you, where they're going to be calculating the area for a given space. I see in our chat box that Melody has identified other skills, so there's finding area, possibly perimeter. Yep. They're using all those multiplication, division, and addition skills. They're adding the two areas together to find the whole. Okay, anybody else want to add some things in the chat box, some other skills that you saw that the students are going to have to apply in completing that task? Maybe I went through it too quickly, but I hope you saw that some other things that the students had, some other skills the students had to apply were alternating ways of calculating. They had to represent their calculations accurately, such as by indicating that they were square feet. They had to explain how their calculations were done and how they determined the area. And at the end, they had to evaluate and make some decisions based on their calculations from the whole task. So I hope you could see that through completing those steps in the process, students were applying real-world skills, real-world mathematical skills in an authentic scenario. And if anybody has ever performed a similar task in laying out furniture or putting down a floor, you know that if you don't do those calculations correctly from the get-go, you are going to end up with some unwanted results. All right, we're going to do the same thing quickly now for an English language arts, grade 5 performance task. And I hope your screen is a little bit bigger than mine. I think it is. But what the students have here, they have this passage that they're going to read about called Among the Ancients. And then the students are going to read a second passage related to it that in your National Forest travel brochures. Having read those two texts, they are then going to complete this task, in which they will now write a story that tells about an experience that takes place in your national forest. In this, they are going to think about what they've read in the two sources, and they're going to use ideas from the sources as well as their own ideas to write the story about the experience a group of people have in the forest. And in their story, they will include events and characters, words, and actions. So that's the whole task right there. This is in multiple parts. I mean, there's the reading and the writing. But so let me pose that question again. What real-world skills are the students applying here in completing this performance task? And you can just add them into the chat box if you would. All right, let me help you out a little bit here. We have some reluctant responders. Clearly, the students, in order to complete the task, are going to have to read carefully and think about these two passages on a related topic. They're going to think about what information from each of them is interesting and something that they could include in the story. And then they're going to be applying the full writing process in order to write their own narrative. And in their story, they're going to include ideas from the sources, just as an author would do. Authors research their topics and to make their stories authentic. And for this task, students do much the same. They use ideas from sources in their own story. They develop their characters and the setting. They use words and actions to do so. And they show their skills in writing. And certainly, students who apply the full writing process would be also looking back at what they've written and revising and edited as they feel needed. And Melody, thank you for the information. Your screen is too small to read these. That's okay. All right. But yes, thank you. Melody points out that she has her students, when they're reading, they jot down the ideas in each section, and absolutely that would help them develop ideas. A student for this particular task would want to jot down some ideas, and they also jot down some of the details that really jump out at them while they're reading, because they want to be sure to use those ideas in their own story. So while this is just a one-item task, you can see that it still involves many skills that the student must apply. And in reading the student's story, an educator is going to gather information about what the student knows and is able to do. Okay, yeah, so our question, read informational text, that I just gave it, we talked about that. Okay, so up to this point, I've been sharing some ideas that I've developed over my years and in my experiences as a test developer and as an educator. But I think most people know that there's so much literature, so much information out there regarding performance assessment and its value. I did a quick search myself, and I found some really valuable pieces of information, other resources. This, for example, is one. It was in an ASCD magazine. And some of the main points that you can see are, aligned to what I've been sharing so far. Is that A performance assessment will do these things. It will extend the fact and skill instruction for balanced literacy. It's rooted in curriculum. As I noted earlier, it encourages that higher order process and thinking skills. It develops those work habits and perseverance. Performance assessment uses earlier knowledge, and it integrates with with new knowledge. A performance assessment serves as both an integral part of the learning and an opportunity to assess the quality of student performance. And as noted earlier, that there are still two concerns that are noted in this particular article, that the time. It takes the time to develop these performance assessment tools and then to evaluate them. And sometimes in that evaluation, there is a certain degree of subjectivity that might creep in when when we teachers evaluate our own students' work. We know more about them than what we see on the paper or on the screen, and so sometimes that has a play in the evaluation. Another nice resource that I found is this one. It's just called Performance Assessment, but it too underscores the value of performance assessment. And this particular article spends some time differentiating between just performance assessment and authentic assessment, focusing on how adequate time must be given for the full process, and that sometimes I know educators fear that that may impact their other instructional opportunities. But when you think about the value you get from a performance assessment, you could see that. You weigh that balance. Is the time worth, because I'll get so much good information from that performance assessment, it's worth the time given to it. The task is, requires the use of knowledge and skills to create a product, complete a performance. The context should be real as possible, and evaluation should be the same as that which is typically used to evaluate adults in similar performance. This particular resource also had some information, some great citations from all the noted researchers and educators, McTighe, Wiggins, Newman, Whalage, Stiggins. Some of the other topics it focuses on are authentic instruction and learning, performance criteria portfolios, developing performance tasks, and some sample performance tasks. So those are just two resources that support much of what I've been sharing so far, but as well as are out there available for educators. So again, I'll pause, see if there's any questions or comments that you would like to add to that which I've shared so far today. If you think of any questions after at the conclusion of this webinar, and you want to shoot them to me or to the organizers of this webinar, please don't hesitate to do so. Please keep in mind too that we do, that regarding the issue of time it takes to prepare performance assessments, McGraw-Hill does offer a pool of already prepared performance assessments to support educators in the measurement of skills, especially those related to college and career readiness standards. So we're coming to the end of the webinar, and I have a parting task for each of you, and that is, I wish I could see this. In a period of 10 seconds, use facial expressions to show as many different emotions as you can. Ready, set, go. Nice exercise. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining our presentation today. And again, I welcome your comments and questions. And I hope that you walk away from here with keener understanding of the value that performance assessment offers. Thank you.